Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Julia Vanderson. I'm the current chair of AMA DocSIG. And DocSIG is very excited to have you join us for today's session focused on navigating the North American job market as an advanced PhD student. DocSIG is a community within the American Marketing Association that supports marketing PhD students with educational resources, connections, and professional development. And today's webinar is a great example of that. We are thrilled to welcome three of our own members, Melissa, Michael, and Kaan, three recent job market veterans who will share their experiences and advice on what to expect, especially when it comes to campus flyouts. All three of them are about to start their assistant professor appointments this fall semester, so in just 2 months. Thank you to everyone joining us today. So especially the many of you planning to go on the market this year. In fact, 61% of our 90 RSVPs indicated to target this year's job market. In terms of Zoom etiquette, we would like to ask you to stay muted, keep your camera on if you can, and use your full name in Zoom. We will start with your submitted questions, then move to a panel discussion. And later on, if time is left, we will open the chat for a live Q&A. Now, I'll hand over to my DocSIG colleague, Xiaoying, who is moderating today's session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Xiaoying, and I'm a PhD candidate from Syracuse University and currently serve as the Vice President of Special Project and Partnership at AMA DocSIG. And I'm very glad that you guys join us today, especially if you are gearing up for the academic job market. And it's a very exciting chapter, but let's be real, it can feel like a full-time job on top of another full-time job. And over the past few months, we have hosted a series of webinars on job market preparation, from crafting your CV and cover letters to navigate the first round interview. And today we'll talk about flyouts. And a flyout isn't just an interview. It's more like a 2 or even 3 days marathon when you're presenting your best self, intellectually, socially, and professionally. And you're giving research talks, teaching demos, and having one-on-one conversations, endless one-on-one conversations, and meals, and shaking a lot of hands. You will meet everyone from the dean, the department chair, to students, staff, and sometimes even a faculty member's family at the dinners. So from the moment you take your planes take off to the moment you hit the payloads, you are always on. So there's no off switch. That's why we are very excited to welcome today's panel, three recent job market candidates who have just been through it and survived and come today to share us with the story. So please join me to welcome Melissa Baucum. She's a recent PhD graduate from University of Tennessee, Nashville, and she'll be joining Oklahoma State University as a faculty in the coming fall. And Kaan Canayaz is a recent PhD graduate from Florida International University, and he will be joining Middle Tennessee State University as faculty next fall. And the last one, Michael Jenkins, is a recent PhD graduate from the University of Kentucky, and he will be joining Mississippi State University as faculty in the coming fall. So let's kick things off with a fun twist. Imagine this, all of you just landing in a new city and check into your hotel, and you're walking into your very first department meeting on a flyout. Everyone is watching, and it's your moment to make the strong first impressions. So to help all of us to picture what that feels like, each panelist will introduce themselves as if they are back on the flyout moment. So we'll start from Melissa, and then Kaan, and finally Michael.
All right, well, thank you. So again, this is going to be just the first 2 minutes of what my job talk introduction looked like. So if we can go to the next slide, I start out with the generic slide and just introduce myself saying, hi, I'm Melissa Baucum. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Tennessee. And then next slide. And so I'd say, I just want to take a couple minutes in the beginning here to talk about myself, my teaching experience, and my research agenda, but I'll spend the majority of our time today on my job market paper. Next. So a little about myself. I did my undergraduate studies in marketing at Pepperdine University. And from there, I started in some industry experience, first at a marketing research agency where I worked mostly with technology clients doing their consumer insights. But after that, I transitioned to Hulu, which is a Disney-based streaming platform, and I worked in marketing strategy there, focusing specifically on subscriber retention and reacquisition. But after that, I decided it was time to start my long-term career goal of becoming a marketing professor, and that's why I transitioned into being a PhD student at the University of Tennessee. Next. So I'll skip teaching experience for the sake of this webinar. Next. A little about my research agenda. So again, I'm a marketing strategy researcher, and one of my favorite ways to approach projects is working with industry partners to look at questions from the firm's perspective and utilize their internal data to try to answer those questions. So my skill set is based in econometric modeling, and specifically, I work a lot with panel data. So essentially, that just means looking at within unit changes over time. But I apply that to the area of customer management and sales management. And some of the areas that I think are interesting in that are specifically retail and sales lead pipeline management. And next. One thing you can see about my dissertation is that actually resembles those two areas quite nicely. So on the left, essay 1 is rooted in the sales space. That one looks at a lead-to-lead prediction of recent salesperson success and how it impacts their future ability to be successful. And the second one is actually on the retail side, and that looks at the item level purchases that customers make. How does their relationship with the retailer change in that item and that basket level after a major disruption? Next. So both these projects are in the works right now, meaning fall of 2024. My first dissertation essay is I'm revising it for a second round submission to JM. And my second essay is currently undergoing analysis with my goal to have a drafted manuscript by February. Next. Okay, so that was a quick recap. I had a couple more slides on research pipeline, but that's how I would do my basic intro.
Yeah, sorry, Kaan, those are my slides.
Go ahead. I don't have slides, so go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll probably be easier. Well, first off, I want to thank Julia and Jiaying for this invitation. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed being here with you all and look forward to getting to know you all throughout the day. Just a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Atlanta. I know some of you are also from that area as well, so hopefully that's something we can talk about later on in one-on-one interviews. So I grew up in Atlanta, but after high school, I actually spent 2 years doing volunteer work abroad in France. And then when I was finished up with that, I attended undergraduate at Brigham Young University, where I started off as an English major, focusing on semantics and things of that nature, which I think really influences my research, as you'll see. But I became really interested in kind of the applied side of creative writing. And so I changed my major to marketing. While I was in the marketing program, I actually started working as a research assistant for some of the professors there. And that really opened my eyes to this world of market and consumer behavior research. And so I definitely became very attracted to that, even when I started working as a salesperson for a startup company called Rapid Reboot, and then transitioned into a marketing director role, and then eventually another role at a different startup called Blue Fire Leads as a digital marketing strategist. I still always had in the back of my mind these consumer behavior questions, and that eventually led me to the University of Kentucky to pursue that passion, and where I've been the past 5 years. And I'm really excited to share with you what I've been doing there. And I think you'll see a lot of my experience, both in English as well as entrepreneurship in my research focus. So kind of a pause there on the actual role play. That's kind of the first slide. I had others going into more. Obviously, if you know Melissa, she definitely is very prepared. So my research agenda just basically focuses on brands, both as symbols communicated to consumers, as well as social agents within communities. And so I like to emphasize small, local, entrepreneurial businesses in that as well. So yeah.
So now we have Kaan to have that introduction too.
So I don't really have slides. I haven't prepared slides for this, but again, thank you very much for inviting us for this amazing webinar. I will just give a brief introduction about myself, like how I did in my job market. So my name is Kaan and I'm originally from Turkey, but I have studied my undergrad degree in England. I went to University of Nottingham and did a management degree there. And then I have my first master's from University of Southampton in England, and that was in entrepreneurship. Finally, I came to US to do my second master's in marketing at Syracuse University, and I just finished up my PhD at Florida International University. But throughout my education, I did many internships and I also worked as a marketing assistant in Turkey. But my experience in marketing was in Turkey, in England, and also in the United States. And usually I like to also talk about my hobbies when I introduce myself because you're getting a job, yes, but you're going to be part of their faculty as well. So I I really like it when I give more personal information about myself rather than what they can see in my CV. So I like to play soccer. I like to play chess. I have my favorite team in Turkey in soccer that I follow every week. And this is basically how I introduce myself in a job talk.
Thank you very much for the fantastic introductions, and it's very valuable to hear how each of you choose to present yourself different those high stake moments. So now let's jump into the main dish of today's session. Let me share the slide again. Okay. So we have grouped the questions submitted by our audience into three big themes. The first one is drop talk, and then the second one is one-on-one etiquette, and also stress logistic management. So each of our panelists will take the lead on a few questions, and each of them will answer the question, share their perspective around 2 to 3 minutes, and then we will open it up for like other panelists to join in to share if they have any add-on suggestion on that. So the first question is for Melissa. Let's start. Flyouts often include a research talk or a teaching demo. So what should a candidate expect in terms of structure, timing, and how can one best prepare, especially if they are unsure about the audience composition or haven't taught any classes before?
Okay, so let's start with the structure. And so on this next slide, I just have an example of a flyout schedule from one of the flyouts that I did. I blinded, the names and the specific information about the university, but hopefully this just gives you a sense of what the typical flyout looks like. And this can vary across, across schools, across research years. So I'm just giving you examples from what I have, but I'm sure there are many other examples we could look at. One thing that was consistent that I noticed is that the job market talk the talks that I did were always 90 minutes in the schedule. Now that doesn't mean talking for 90 minutes. I would highly advise against making a 90-minute presentation. But despite that conformity in the unit of time, I never had a job talk at the same time. Sometimes like this, it was first thing in the morning. Sometimes it was late morning. Sometimes right after lunch, early afternoon, or the last thing before I left on the main job talk day or the main, flyout day. So I think my understanding is that a lot of times the schedule gets determined by finding the availability of the dean. That's kind of the cornerstone, and then the department head, and then the job talk gets fit around that. And so you might not have as much agency in determining when you're speaking, but I think as long as you go in just prepared, that's one of those areas where we can practice that flexibility. So on the next slide, I laid out just a couple guidelines that I had for, okay, if I have 90 minutes, how should I be splitting that up? So the advice that I received was have about 10 minutes, maybe less, about the about me sections. That would be similar to what I went through in terms of research pipeline, teaching experience and interest in the university or why you might be a fit there. like Kaan was saying, bringing in your hobbies. One thing I did is at some universities, I run half marathons, and I had actually run a half marathon before in their city. And so I would put a picture of that in that intro section, just something to kind of humanize myself as a candidate. And then I prepared about 40 minutes of just the research itself, my job market paper, and then left about 40 minutes for Q&A. And this is where that flexibility comes in, because talk to your advisor, talk to your mentors about how much time they would recommend allocating into these different buckets. But I would say don't expect the Q&A to actually be a nice, neat section at the end. It was more so 40 minutes for Q&A to happen throughout my 40 minutes of prepared content. So, and I'd be interested to hear what the other recent graduates have to say in terms of their breakdown for research talks as well. But I think the goal would be finding a balance between, can I be long enough that I'm not doing a 15-minute presentation where they're wondering, was that it? Long enough to make sure I can cover my research in detail, but short enough that I can really just respect the natural limitations of the human attention span. And then one other thing, on the next slide, I have an example of when you're talking to mixed audiences. So maybe you're speaking to a mostly CB crowd or mostly quant crowd, or maybe it's mixed. So in this case, what I would do, and actually what I did throughout, is I saw my presentations like teaching. So on this first example on the left, this is an idea I was trying to convey about how we lose detail about recency when we aggregate measures like conversion rate. So I showed a sequence of events and just visually showed what if those events happened at the beginning or the end of that sequence. So that's to communicate the intuition of what I was looking at as a variable. The next slide is looking at the actual equations. And for those who wanted to know the details, okay, I use recency. What does that mean? Okay, it's an exponentiated discount factor. Do I normalize it? Do I not? It gave me the chance to talk about that, or for those who liked understand more through equations, to be able to at least see what I was describing. But then I went back, and on that final panel there, I went back and I showed what is that recency score actually capturing if I map it back onto the visual. So that was just an example of one way that I approached trying to communicate to both audiences.
Thank you, Melissa. So do Kaan and also Michael have something to add on? Please feel free to join in.
Yeah, I agree with Melissa that you certainly shouldn't plan for a 90-minute presentation, but have 90 minutes worth of material, because during that Q&A, you don't know what they're going to ask, but you should have practiced enough in front of other people that you kind of have a vague idea of these are categories of questions they might ask. So I included a lot of supplemental material in my presentation, like at the end. And so when I got a question that they asked, I'm like, that's a great question. Here's a graphic that answers that question. And then something else I added was like a little bit of information on another essay that I was working on, just in case we got to the end. A lot of times you won't, but some universities, like one of the universities I went to, the job talk they didn't ask any questions because it was more of a teaching school. And so I got to the end, I had a lot of time left, and they're like, okay, what else are you working on? And so I had some material left over to share.
I think that's an excellent
agree.
point, Michael. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah, just having the appendix of content is really good. Sorry, Kaan?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I agree with the appendix, because just in case they ask you a question and you don't have the material, it will look bad on you. So it's always better to have everything prepared. And I also had a similar schedule in terms of my job talks, as Melissa did. But as she said, the time of the research talk might change. So if you're not really a morning person, and if they put a 8 a.m. research talk, then make sure you wake up early, have your breakfast, have your coffee, or whatever you need to wake up, because that's your time to shine, and you need to be prepared for it.
So next we can move to next questions. For Kaan, how do you manage unexpected interruptions, difficult questions, or moments when things don't go as planned?
Yeah, so, and this will happen. There are going to be unexpected interruptions. In every interview, they're gonna ask you guys difficult questions, that's for sure. So I think the first thing is to stay calm. Don't show that you realize that the question is difficult to you, just stay calm, acknowledge the problem. It could be a difficult question, it could be something going on with your presentation, with tech, but just stay calm, don't panic, and try to solve it quickly. In terms of difficult questions or moments that I didn't expect happen, was for one of the schools, they actually got very political, maybe because of my country. They asked about my political views, and this is a big no in my opinion, but if it happens, you need to be ready for it as well. They were asking me about how I would define a conservative person and so on. So just make sure you don't just burst out, and try to be nice and understanding and just swing it. Also, as I said, they're going to ask curveballs, a lot of difficult questions about your methodology, your contribution, maybe future pipeline. So it's always good to prepare for such difficult questions. Practice your presentation a lot with faculty members, with other doctoral students, and if you can, practice it with professors from other departments. Because in some schools, marketing departments is by itself, but in other schools, it could be combined with management, entrepreneurship, and those faculty members might ask you questions that you would never expect. So preparation, practice is very important. And sometimes they might ask you difficult questions to see your reaction. So maybe they are not trying to get a correct answer out of you. They're just trying to see your communication style, if you get angry to difficult questions or unexpected things. So be prepared for that. For example, you can say, "Oh, that's a great point. Let me think about it a little bit." Or if they ask you if you tested something, you can say, "I haven't tested it yet, but it could be great for future research." So just swing those curveballs. That's my suggestion.
Thank you very much. So, Michael, go ahead. Do you have some add-on, or you just waiting for next question?
I do have an add-on. If Melissa doesn't have anything to add too, but Khan's last point was really, really good about a lot of the times they're going to ask difficult questions just to gauge your reaction. If you make it to the job talk, then odds are they already think your research is kind of up to muster. And so the research presentation is almost more about the presentation than the research. And what I mean by that is they're really just looking to see, like, is this a competent person who can communicate effectively to students, to other other academics? Are they pleasant to be around? Is this someone that I want to work with? And so it's really important to manage your emotions in this, and to not get defensive when they ask a question that you feel like should be obvious, or when they challenge you on a construct or something like that. Just be as friendly and open. Be like, "Oh, that's a great point. We thought about that, and here's how we resolved it." Or, "That's a great point. I really want to talk to you more about that to get your insights." Things like that are a great way to manage that.
Thank you very much. That's a very natural point for us to ask about the next question. So, besides the content, what helped make your talk or teaching demo go well? How did you keep people engaged and explaining things clearly to a broad audience?
Yeah. So hopefully you should all be familiar with the three rhetoric appeals: ethos, logos, and pathos. So logos is like the logic, and I think that has to do a lot with the content of your presentation. And so you should be pretty well versed in the content. But it's important to remember that there's pathos, which is the emotional appeal. And I'm not saying that you have to make it emotional in the same way that a romantic comedy is emotional, but it should be interesting to humans. Okay, you don't want to present like a robot, or like someone or the presentation was written by a robot. So I have a history of stand-up comedy, so I included jokes where appropriate. It wasn't a stand-up routine, but I included a little bit of humor where I could. I spent time making the presentation as visually interesting as possible. So, Zain, could you go? Yeah. So I created a template that was my own. All right, and so and I matched the color schemes to the university to kind of make that emotional appeal. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see this this was the following slide, but for a different university. And you can see I spent time creating a template, then I could just match to the university's color theme, just to make that more accessible to them. And there's like a lot of cool tutorials on YouTube on how to create cool animations or transitions or visually interesting PowerPoints. So take some time doing that, and then focus a lot on your ethos, which is your source credibility, your source attractiveness. Kind of to the earlier point, the research talk is almost more about the talk itself, the presentation itself. So make sure that you're presenting as someone that they want to spend time with. So I spent a lot of time before I even arrived to campus learning everyone's name. I went to their website. I made note cards and like flashcards with their picture, their position, so that when I was in the presentation and someone asked a question, it'd be like, "That's a great point, Professor so and so." Like I knew their name even before I even met them in person. I knew what they were interested in. A lot of times I would even have read a paper that they wrote and be like, "That's a great point. Um, you know, I really liked what you did in this paper, and here's how my research kind of connects to that." And so that made me seem credible and knowledgeable because I did a lot of work up front, and having done that work kind of allows you to be more relaxed in the moment because you have that well of knowledge to go back to. Um, and then some other things that other people have said, connecting to the area, making sure that you let them know, like, hey, this is the place I'm interested in, and having cues and signals throughout the presentation. So, I use as examples of brands in my presentation, I use local brands that are native to whatever city that I was in, just to kind of connect to them.
Thank you very much, Michael. And now we will move to next themes, which is the questions about one-on-ones etiquette. So for Melissa, this question is for Melissa. During meals, hallway chat, and other informal moments, what kind of conversation did you have, and how can candidate balance between personal and professional?
Yeah, so I think one thing as I was reflecting on this that is a helpful skill to have is be prepared for flexibility. So every person approaches that conversation in a different way. And so even and this kind of goes back to when it comes to the interview. Some interviews with, one-on-one faculty that I had, some, started the conversation by saying, I guess we're supposed to ask you some questions and something like that. Anyway, do you have any questions for us? And so that signaled to me, okay, I'm kind of going to run this conversation, not in an overbearing way, but it's going to be up to me to keep, asking questions and keep it going. And others, I walk into that room and they say, okay, I have 7 questions for you. And at the end, I'll give you some time to ask questions of me. So very structured, very CV line by line, very different approaches. But I think the same thing comes with those hallway chats, those, informal moments. Some faculty are a bit more formal about it. But for the most part, I think people are used to having conversations like at conferences or, other people that you meet in a different setting. And so I learned about people's dogs. I learned about, I realized that one of the faculty and I actually ran the same half marathon 5 years ago and had no idea. It's like those kinds of things can just come up naturally, but I think flexibility is the key for this. Really just gauging what that person is, what their style is, and then adapting to that in terms of how they like to run that conversation. But one of the things that, and Michael mentioned this briefly, is really helpful to ask about is the area. So, asking them, oh, what do you like to do in your free time here? Or are there any areas in this region that you'd recommend seeing? Or, what surprised you when moving to this region? And hearing their personal experiences about living there can be really helpful not just to keep the conversation going, but I think even more importantly, helping you learn about, is that university in that region, because you're moving your life there, not just your work, is that region really going to be a fit for you as an individual or as a family or whoever you're bringing with you?
Thank you, Melissa. If we don't have add-on, then I will move to next questions. So next question is for Kaan. Can you please suggest us some expected dress etiquette for different stage? For example, for the job talk, how formal should candidate be? And for meals, is smart casual acceptable, or should candidate stay fully professional all the time? And also, any tips for staying comfortable in formal wearing throughout a long day?
Yes, sure. So job market for the job talk, definitely business formal. For guys, like suit and tie for sure, and Melissa may add on to that for women. But suit and tie also includes Zoom. In my opinion, I always wore my suit and tie in the Zoom meetings because the first impression matters, right? So for most of the schools you're interviewing, this is the first time you're meeting them, but they are meeting you too. So it's always good to dress up very well. And in terms of the color of the suit, I suggest to get something solid colors and neutral colors. So my job talk suit was navy blue. So navy blue is good. It's not black because black might look very depressing, in my opinion. But navy blue looks good, and also if you spill something on you, it doesn't really show up. So that's why some solid and darker color works best, in my opinion. Don't wear anything shiny or flashy in terms of accessories. Just wear a nice suit and tie. And my advisor at the time told me, don't worry about any money that you're spending on the suit. It needs to look nice. That was his suggestion to me. And in meals, it depends. It's usually business casual. I just wore a nice shirt. I don't. Maybe once I wore a tie, but it depends on who you are having dinner with as well. It might be the department chair, it might be the dean in some smaller schools. So depending on who you're having dinner with, your attire might change. Also, sometimes they just tell you. I once received a message. He said, I'm wearing very casual clothes. Please don't just wear casual. This is gonna be very casual. So I wore casual for that dinner. And also you can check the restaurant's name on Google and see what type of place it is. If it's a very upscale place, maybe dress up more formal. And finally, in terms of staying comfortable, definitely get comfortable shoes because that day you're going to be standing up the whole day. You're going to be walking around, you're going to be walking inside the campus and outside of the campus. And if it is a winter time, if it is snowing, then just make sure you have all the dresses you need, something warm maybe, and bring extra clothing. These are my suggestions.
Thank you very much.
I can chime in here just with a different, or like alternative perspective. So I don't have any experience in men's clothing, but for women's clothing, I know as doc students, we can oftentimes be on a budget. And so one resource that I found to be really helpful is there's a secondhand online store called ThreadUp, and they have lots of great business casual, business professional wear. So, and then the other thing, just on that third point, is how do you stay comfortable? I just had a philosophy of, I'm going to be an outfit repeater. I embraced my Lizzie McGuire internally. And so I just picked what I would wear for first day, second day, third day. And I took that same outfit to every flyout. So, just saying that in terms of if you don't necessarily have the resources to go buy something brand new, or, if you're worried about the cognitive load of repacking every time, my advice would just be keep it simple, and secondhand shops often have great quality things as well.
Thank you very much. So now we'll move to Michael. Move to next question.
Yeah.
So for Michael, do you have any advice on dining etiquette during flyouts? Like what types of food are safest to order, like easy to digest, won't affect your breath, and won't get stuck in your teeth? And what price range is more appropriate? And is it ever acceptable to order a drink?
Yeah, lots to digest there. So I think it's important to remember going in that you're not likely to win a lot of points with etiquette, but it can lose you a lot of points. Okay, so you're not going to get the job because you were the most proper person that they took out. But if you are just a horror show to dine with, then that can definitely be a point against you. Um, you're all adults. I think you probably know basic table manners. If not, just watch a tutorial on YouTube. But don't chew with your mouth open. If they ask you a question while you're eating, I kind of do the simple thing where I like hold my hand in front of my fist and like maybe give them a second, and they generally kind of laugh at that because they know you're trying to be proper. Um, you guys have been around for several decades. I think you know what kind of foods you find safe. Um, the flyout is probably not the best time to be adventurous with food. So stick with the foods that you know you like. It might not be your favorite. You might be really interested in trying new things. Just wait until you get hired. You can even make a joke of it, be like, "Man, that looks really good, but I don't know if I can eat that. Um, maybe you guys have to bring me back when I get the job." It's like, um, it's okay to be nervous, and they understand that you're nervous. So I'm someone who when I get nervous, I have a hard time eating. Um, and so when I went to breakfast um, at Mississippi State, I could only eat like half of my biscuit, and they were well aware that I was nervous, and I was aware that I was nervous, and it was okay. All right. Um, And then as far as, like, what price range, this is something that you need to just take your cues from everyone else, okay? There's a kind of a funny story that we at UK, we hosted a candidate who went out to, the nice steak restaurant there in Lexington and ordered the most expensive steak on the menu, like, several $100s of steak, and now UK can't take anyone out to that restaurant anymore. And they didn't hire the guy almost exclusively because of that, or at least it was a major thing. So obviously, don't order the most expensive thing on the menu, but you don't need to order like just an appetizer just to be budget conscientious. Just take your cue from what everyone else is ordering. You can even ask them like, "Hey, what's this? What do you recommend?" Um, as far as is it acceptable to order a drink, I'm probably not the best person to ask. I don't drink, so I never ordered a drink. Um, but again, I think it's important to take cues from everyone else as to how appropriate it is. I would definitely recommend not drinking enough to make you buzzed. So, like a small glass of wine or a beer if everyone else is ordering is probably okay. I think ordering water is probably a good social signal though, because it just shows that you're conscientious of where you're at, and what you're doing. Like, hey, I know you guys are on a budget. I'll just order water. It's fine. It's healthy. Good for you. There's no downsides. Um, and just other than that, sometimes they'll ask you where you want to go to eat. So I think it's important before you go out to maybe look up a few restaurants around, and then you can kind of choose like, hey, I don't do well with, Japanese food, but I like Mexican, so, I can handle Mexican really well. So maybe I can find a Mexican place close to the campus or my hotel. Other times they'll tell you exactly where you're going to go and eat in advance, so you can already just have a order in mind before you even show up. You like look at the menu beforehand. So it really depends on how much information you're dealing with, who you're eating with. But I mean, you guys are marketers. You guys understand how to work with social cues. So just take as many social cues from the people you're eating with, and just make sure that whatever cue you're giving, whatever signal you're giving, is someone who's easygoing, cognizant of other people, and cognizant of the situation that you're in.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move to the last set of the questions. So this question is for Melissa. Flyouts are long and packed with a lot of activity. And how did you stay focused, alert, and rested during your visits, especially with the travel and also the time zones?
Yeah, so one thing that I just wanted to call back to is if we go to the next slide, I just have another slide of that schedule. So this could look like a really long day. You know, you look at Friday and it's starting at 8 a.m. and it basically goes until 5 p.m. There's a 1 hour break to reset and then 6 to 8. You know, that's a long 12-hour day. And so on one hand, we could say, you know, that's like a 12-hour performance. This is high energy, something you've never done before. But another perspective that I wanted to introduce, and if you just click to the animation, yeah. So this is a screenshot of Winter AMA. This is, you know, Saturday, February 15th. The day started at 7 a.m. with an awesome DocSIG, you know, mentors breakfast. You went session to session to session. Maybe you had a big presentation that you were really nervous for at some point in the middle of all that. More sessions, and then ended with a awesome DocSig and sustainable marketing reception. That went probably 6:30 to 7:30. So that is another 12-hour day. And I think a lot of what can be stressful about a flyout is thinking about all the uncertainty and all the newness. And I think what I did for myself that really helped is I thought about what's introducing uncertainty for me, and let me see what aspects of that I can make, you know, take the uncertainty out of. That's why I mentioned earlier, I planned what I would wear for those 3 days, and I just repeated that across any interview. So it took that stress away. And then same thing with this. I heard the advice to think of this like a conference where you're at every session, or you're the, you know, person hosting every session. And so I really like that perspective because it took out the uncertainty of I've never done a 12-hour performance or a job market, but I have done a 12-hour conference day. And even though I didn't see in the schedule a bathroom break, you know, I found times to take a bathroom break or eat a snack or those kinds of things. So one recommendation there is just advocate for yourself when you do need a break. If you need to fill up water or, you know, use the restroom in between transitioning to offices. My experience is people are very understanding and would even offer that, you know, saying, hey, would you like a break now before you come and meet with me? I know you've been in session, not session, I even said sessions. You've been in meetings back to back. So that would be my advice. And when you do have those little breaks or those little moments, and sometimes the breaks are even scheduled in, just taking a couple deep breaths, you know, resetting and knowing it's a long social day, but I can be really proud of myself when my head does hit the pillow tonight. Because once I get back to the hotel, I'm off. It's just me. I can relax, you know, take off that Zoom face, if you will, the you know, the feeling that you're always interacting with people. And so an end does come to it.
Thank you, Melissa. Now we move to next questions for Kaan. So what should candidates know about the practical side of the flyout, such as travel arrangement, expenses, or getting a sense of the local area? And how much does it typically cost? Should I expect to pay out of my pocket first? And it is worthwhile to explore the surrounding area or community during the visits to assess the lifestyle fit, and if so, how should one approach it?
Okay, so travel arrangements is usually the school reaching out to you that you are invited for a job talk or a campus visit. And in my experience, larger schools often book it for you, book both the flight and the hotel for you. But I've also had some experiences with smaller schools or teaching schools that they booked the hotel for me, but I had to arrange my flights and my transportation to my hotel. So in that case, they reimburse you. So you need to book your flights, keep your receipts, keep the receipts of all the meals you had, the Uber or Lyft receipts, and you would usually get reimbursed within 2 weeks to maybe 4 weeks, in my experience. And for that, I would suggest you to, you know, have some money spared for such expenses, and it will be around like $1,000 maybe for the flights, depending on how far that school is. Depending on the town of the school, the price might change, but I would say if you can keep like $1,000 on the side for these things, it will be beneficial. And in terms of getting the sense of the surrounding areas, yeah, I mean, it's not just a job. Like this is going to be your life. You're going to be living there as well, not only working. So make sure you explore the town if you have time. Just walk around the campus, walk around the downtown, check out some coffee shops. Maybe if you're interested in gyms, check out the gyms. And if you have time, also see the housing options. And I think Melissa also mentioned this. You can ask lifestyle questions to other faculty members, like the school districts, the commute times, and this shows your interest in the school. This shows that you're serious and you're thinking to stay there longer time, which is, in my opinion, a plus. So definitely see how you would fit into that city or how that city would fit into your lifestyle.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to our last question in this set. So for Michael, what if you have specific needs like a disability or childcare? How can you bring this up without hurting your chances? And have you seen schools handle this well?
Yeah, I think the best way to frame this question is kind of an extension of what Kaan was saying, that you know this is your life, right? And it's important that you're interviewing the school as well, but also understand that when you get to the flyout stage, they're already interested in you, and they are trying to sell themselves as much as you are trying to sell yourself. Okay, so schools actually handle a lot of these specific needs pretty well. And if the school doesn't handle it well, it probably isn't a place that you would be happy at anyways, okay? So, and you can use some of these things to your advantage. So, when I went to my flyouts, whenever I could, I would take my wife. And that one, it was a signal like, hey, we're really interested in this place. And we were expecting our first child at the time. And, I didn't spend the entire fly out talking about that, but I brought it up in natural ways and they really enjoyed that. In fact, when as part of one of my campus visits, we had a real estate tour, and my department chair specifically asked that my wife come on the real estate tour with us, and she spent more time talking to my wife than to me, just about selling the area, and so that was a great opportunity to kind of let them know, like, hey, I have these specific needs, and you can work that into conversations. Now, I don't have a direct answer for disabilities. I think it really depends on the kind of disability. Like, let's be honest, if you have a physical disability, it's probably already obvious. Um, but if you have a mental health challenge, for example, you know, recognize that you're probably not the only one there, who has those challenges. And I think it's just take some wisdom and when to bring it up, or how to bring it up. But there are things you can ask, such as, hey, what kind of benefits do you have, and do you have access to more holistic medicine or mental health resources? And those are ways of kind of addressing the same question. But for the most part, if something is going to affect your life and your lifestyle, then make sure that you are getting that base covered while you're on the fly out. And if the school doesn't handle you asking those questions well, it's probably not a place that you would enjoy being at. If they don't treat your family or the idea of you having a family well, then it's probably not a place that you would enjoy having your family, right? That's probably a sign that you don't want to be there. If they're going to be very rude and dismissive of disabilities or challenges that you have, it's probably not a place that you would like to be at or would be at long term anyways. So I would recommend not sacrificing your health and well-being just to get one specific job. Just being honest with them up front, and you know a lot of it can actually be played to your benefit as well. It's good. It's a good way to have conversations, to tell them that you're interested in the area, that you're already looking for these resources. So, I I think it's not something to be as worried about as it might seem going in.
Thank you very much. So thank you for sharing such detail and also thoughtful insights so far. It has been incredibly valuable. So to wrap up the structural portion of today's panel, we would love to hear a little bit more about your personal experience. So these are all very quick questions, just 50 seconds each. So feel free to keep your answers concise. So the first one is a highlight, something that went especially well, like for example, Flyout mentorship, unexpected offer during your job market experience. We can go with yes, Melissa.
So one thing that changed my perspective is I went in being more nervous and left realizing I really enjoyed the Flyout experience. It wasn't as stressful as I thought, and I met so many interesting people. And I would ask, especially assistant professors, for what advice they had for the first year on the job and what they learned. And I found that especially helpful. Even conversations with deans were really insightful and encouraging.
Thank you.
I mean, something that I was surprised with was for one of the teaching schools, they arranged a student to have lunch with me, but they specifically arranged a student who has been to where I am from, who has been to Turkey before, and she was able to make conversations with me about Turkey and all those cultural things. So that was pretty interesting to me.
And for Michael.
Yeah, I took the opportunity to make the flyout days some of the best days I've ever had, and so, um, and the kind of days that I would like to have every day. So I made a point of getting up early and working out. It's not something I do every day, but it was, like I can do it one day, and it kind of helped me have a really good day. I took time to go visit places. One of the places I visited was near a beach, and so I took time and went to the beach and just kind of relaxed there. And it was kind of in the winter where I'm from, but I was able to enjoy the beach, and it was just a great period just to relax and be like, yeah, this could be a place I could see myself in. And then I had something to talk about later on when they're like, oh, did you enjoy coming here? I'm like, yeah, I actually went to the beach yesterday before I checked into the hotel, and it was great. And they're like, oh, awesome, we love that beach. We go there often. Some of us live near there. It was a great way to not only relax before, but to have something to talk about.
And the next one is share a challenge, something that didn't go as planned or surprise you. So we go ahead with Melissa.
One challenge was at one of the flyouts that I did. It was about a 20-minute Uber to campus, so I left 25-30 minutes of buffer time, but there was an accident going into campus, so we had to wait in traffic and be turned around by police, and all the roads into campus were closed off. So just a good reminder that I got there on time. I was proactive about reaching out to them, but unexpected things can come up, and so leave yourself lots of buffer, because you never know who's going to, for example, get in an accident right in front of you, and you might have to take 30 more minutes than you expected, even though you're so close to being there. So I remember that being stressful, but it's good to remember I was probably more stressed about that than anyone on, any of the faculty were.
And for Kaan?
Yes, so things might not go as planned for you, but also it might not go as planned for the university as well. So once I had a flyout at a school in the north during winter, and after my flight arrived, they had a snowstorm, and the university shut down. So they couldn't really have my interview on campus. They had to arrange everything on Zoom at that time. So I was staying in my hotel on Zoom all day long, meeting all the professors and the dean and everyone.
And for Michael?
Yeah, for one of my flyouts, I showed up and I knew instantly when I showed up to campus and to the city that I did not want to be at that university. Now, that can happen, but I made a point not to let it impact how I interacted with the faculty there. And so I met some really great people, and I think it's a really important, every time you interact with someone in this field, it has ramifications for your career down the road, right? And so I knew I didn't want to be at that school, but I don't know who's going to leave that school and go to another place and then open up an opportunity for me elsewhere. And so even though I knew that like I don't want to live here. This is just not the place I want to be and bring my family. Don't let that affect how you end up treating the people. Like treat them as you are as if you're interested in them as you should be. And I still did everything I could to get the job offer because if that's the only offer I got, then maybe I have to make sacrifices. Um, so sometimes you show up and you're like, man, this isn't the place I want. But don't let that affect how you treat them, how you treat the interview process. Still go out and try and get the job.
Thank you very much. And one very last questions. Do you have any specific aspect you would like to share that help you stand out? So we'll start from Melissa.
This is kind of hard to answer, but I think, one thing that's helped is starting in, I believe it was my third year, started going to more conferences. And so I found that on the job market, maybe it wasn't that I had a super unique brand or, was super different than other candidates they were bringing in, but I had met some of the faculty before. And so that was really nice going and seeing those familiar places. And then the second thing would be just understanding what is your brand. It's sometimes feels constricting to put yourself in these boxes and that kind of thing. But it is helpful if people think in those boxes. Just for me, I said, okay, I'm in the strategy bucket. I work with firm partners. That's what makes me different. And so still working on that brand, but hopefully having some relationships when you are going into it.
Thank you. And for Kaan?
I definitely agree with Melissa, and definitely go to conferences, network with people, get to know people. That's a big, big help for you. And also, we have been talking about how you fit into the department, but also you need to research and understand how you are able to distinguish yourself from the faculty members that are already there. So you can show them how you can contribute to their team rather than just keep doing what they are able to do.
Yeah, I'm gonna second what Melissa and Kaan said. Remember that you guys are marketers, so I think we have the advantage in that we spend a lot of time figuring out how to position products or brands to stand out in the marketplace, and those same principles can be applied. And so one thing I tried to do is I tried to signal every single flyout and just every single interview that I had, even in early stages, that I was interested in them and their school. Because I think that's comes down. That's the number one thing that they look at is who is going to come if we extend an offer to. I have heard stories of schools offering their second favorite person because they didn't think their first favorite would accept the offer. And so make sure that you signal that you want to be there. So I bought a tie of the school's color, and that was a simple, cost-effective way of signaling that I was interested in going there. So just anything you can do, like, hey, if you extend the job to me, I will most likely take it. I think that's the best way you can go about it.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hand over to Julia.
Well, thank you all so much for giving us these valuable insights. I learned a lot, and now I'm thinking, what can I as a woman do to get a tie in the school
Jewelry.
color?
You can use jewelry, a little brooch.
I could use a pen, right?
You can use a pen. You could.
I love that.
If you're really dedicated, just get a tattoo.
Well, no, we're not so much into that.
Okay.
I appreciate all of you sharing so many insights, taking out time of your day. You must be so busy planning your move to your new schools. We're also incredibly proud of you to become assistant professors. So big shout out to everyone being here. Audience, please clap your hands. You can just do it on video or use the Zoom feature. This was part of our job market webinar series. And we are actually hosting a big mentoring opportunity at the upcoming Summer AMA conference in Chicago in August. We're going to do a pre-conference all Friday morning. So if you are flying in Thursday evening anyway to attend the conference, consider joining us at the pre-conference where we are doing a huge mentorship extension to our traditional mentors breakfast. early bird deadline for Summer AMA ends on July 16th. So you have about 2 weeks to decide if you want to join us and pay the little price for it. And also, I want to highlight that every year we have the Who Went Where survey, who is actually being used by faculty to write tenure letters for you, but also to give future job market cohorts a feeling of what the market could be like in the next year. And I want to encourage you to participate, but also talk to your senior PhD students to encourage them to participate. And ultimately, thank you all again so much for being here. Thank you to Zhao Ying from DocSIG for moderating it, but also to Ishida from DocSIG for managing our waiting room. There is so much work that goes into these webinars, and I just want to highlight the big team effort here. So again, Melissa, Kaan, and Michael, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope everyone has a great day and learned a little bit something here. Bye, everyone.